Welcome back. This morning, the State Capture Commission will be focusing on Transnet, which is set to make their presentations at the inquiry today. Transnet has been very topical in recent days for the appointment of its Group Chief Executive, Portia Derby, and we're just going to try to find how one conversation links with the other. And let's bring in our economics reporter, Arabile. jGumede, thank you so much for making the time this morning. As I was saying, very topical Transnet in the past few days about the appointment of Portia Derby. Of course, other stories coming out of that. But what do you make of her decision to recuse herself of processes relating to the investigation of state capture matters?
Ultimately, it actually is a good sentiment, if you ask me. The reason for that, let's remember that the whole inquiry as well will include parts of her ex-husband, and she said that if there's anything that has to do with either the dismissal, the somehow, litigation issues or whatever the case might be with regards to her ex-husband, Brian Molefe, she says she doesn't want to be a part of that, and if he needs to go to jail for his sins, let him go. This is a lady who, more than 10 years ago, according to a few associates, was already trying to distance herself from her ex-husband because of an association with the Gupta family. She was anti-Gupta before any of us even knew what that meant at the time, right? So if any way, if we wanted anything from her, we'd really just be able to tell what the association was between her husband. But with regards to Transnet, I don't see why she'd need to form part of that process in order to, because I think it would only do her more harm than it would any good, really, this scenario.
She comes in highly regarded. What does her appointment, how does it speak to the overall problem of lack of leadership at state-owned companies?
So if we were to talk about just outside of the fact that she's the ex-wife of Brian Molefe, I think she's a really phenomenal person actually on her own. She's a BSc graduate from the University of Witwatersrand, right? She worked at Oricon as well as, she was really responsible for Africa with regards to infrastructure projects there. She had just worked with the former Public Enterprises Minister as well, I think it's Alex Stewart as well, with regards to trying to get infrastructure projects for Ubu Investments, as they've named it. That was one of her most recent projects. She's also the former Director General at the Department of Public Enterprises. We're talking about a woman who has been part of the trade, has known what needs to be done. She's been part of the private sector in some ways and also part of the public sector. So she kind of knows how to try and bring the two together, which is exactly what is necessary now. So I think actually from a leadership point of view, it is very much a good appointment. Of course, the unfortunate element here is that it is marred by the fact that she is the ex-wife, my apologies, of Brian Molefe, which is kind of the same thing that mars Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, right? Considering the graft allegations against their ex-spouses.
Right. Let's talk about what we can expect to happen at the State Capture Commission today. Transnet has been flagged as one of those companies where the first prosecutions in relation to state capture could come out from on the basis of the solid evidence that has come out of proceedings in relation to Transnet. What can we expect?
Look, I mean, it's going to be very revealing, right? You expect to find exactly what happened. The 56 locomotive contract that, of course, was agreed not so long ago, the 56 billion rand locomotive contract, that was, 1,000 locomotives odd, that is now in question, is going to be very revealing as to what exactly are the processes and procedures that were followed or weren't followed really in that regard. How far along did that process actually really go? And I think the big thing and the big element to also find out about here is just how significant was the leadership at the time, of course, Brian Molefe being at the helm of that, with regards to the state capture process, as it is politically known. One of the other key elements, I suppose, to this will also become just how bad things have digressed and progressed really at Transnet itself. Everything from cost, it costs a whole lot to actually use Transnet's rail than to use road in South Africa if you are doing freight goods of any kind. The Durban harbour itself takes up to 3 times more time in terms of turnaround.
Which is problematic for business.
Exactly, and that's compared to the rest of the world. So people would ask themselves, why should I come to South Africa then? Why would I want to do that? There have been excess delays and people are really worried about those sort of things. So if that can be fixed, and I suppose those will be the elements that, you want to find out why have things become as bad as they are right now, and hopefully that will be revealed today.
Just finally, what business did Transnet getting involved? What business did they have getting involved in the New Age broadcasts at the SABC?
Look, it baffles the mind as well, right? Trying to find any sort of loophole, any sort of gap to try and make either a PR play or a financial play of any sorts, trying to associate yourself politically means that you're trying to get a leg up, a firmer understanding and a firmer grip of how things sort of look in the environment, whether it be economically or whether just for business purposes. So it baffles the mind up until this point, really. What was the reasoning behind getting involved in all of that? And clearly the association then, unfortunately, with a particular family and the leadership of the country at the time doesn't set us.
Thank you again for coming through. What are the big business stories today?
Well, we're certainly going to be watching out for Tongaat Hewlett again, though. You know, they did have a massive fall. They did have a massive fall yesterday. Sasol continues to try and, get back to some profitable trading as well after the US situation and that plant not necessarily doing too well. We'll unpack that, and we'll also hopefully get a sense of just how the markets are faring now, considering the coronavirus, and whether some positivity has perhaps been lifted into that market picture.
And on that coronavirus story, that's where we'll be ending our conversation and moving to